John chapter 21, verses 15 through 19. When they'd finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter felt hurt because he had said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this he said to him, "Follow me." I've always rather liked Peter. I'm not quite sure why, but of all the disciples I found him the easiest to engage with. He was a bit tempestuous, but grounded and earthy, and I can't imagine that the fishermen of ancient Judea were all that different to the fishermen of today. Used to danger and risk, somewhat brave, respectful of the forces of nature, and unlikely to suffer fools gladly. Peter, I imagine, was also probably great fun at parties, if his opening words to the crowd in the book of Acts is anything to go by. For him to proclaim loudly that "we are not drunk" does provide at least the possibility that they could have been. But throughout the gospel accounts and the book of Acts, you get this strong sense that he was a man of charisma and presence. Fishermen tend to cut through waffle and say things as they see them, no nonsense. I like that. But Peter is even better, for he displays that most human of qualities, the ability to make a complete and utter mess of things. During Jesus' life on earth, he manages to get it wrong too often for comfort, betraying the natural human emotions and weaknesses that I suspect a great many of us would share had we been present. Today's gospel reading is almost the very end of John's gospel. There are a few other verses, but this is almost the end. For I think it's important to recognise where in the story we actually are. See, this passage comes some time after the Passion narrative. Jesus' death and resurrection are pretty much old news, to the disciples at least, by the time today's exchange takes place. It isn't clear exactly how much time has passed since the resurrection, but we are several weeks forward, and at least some 200 kilometres away from Jerusalem. Peter had given up waiting for Jesus after his appearance to Thomas, and he'd returned home to his former homeland and trade, his discipleship effectively over. The narrative today can't help but remind us of Peter's denial of Jesus 3 times on the day of his crucifixion, and I have little doubt that the trifold nature of Jesus' questioning was intended to remind Peter of that. The key point, however, of this exchange is what it's to do with, and that's forgiveness. 2 disciples materially betrayed Jesus on that fateful day. The first was Judas, and the second was Peter. On the cross, Jesus sought forgiveness for all those who had caused his death. The Romans, Pilate, the Jews, Judas, Peter, everyone. All were forgiven. Judas, racked by guilt, tried to hand his reward back, and this being rejected, goes on and kills himself. It was he who rejected the amnesty, not Jesus who denied it. Peter, by contrast, whilst racked by guilt, finds it within himself to accept the forgiveness offered and can hence move forward, even if his next decision was to give up waiting and go back home. Jesus' threefold questioning makes clear that it is amnesty, not amnesia, that was on offer, and this eventually irritates Peter, who felt hurt at the probing. That said, to be fair to Jesus, with Peter's track record, I think it was sensible to check. And not just to move forward, but to be commissioned by Jesus to take on the role of pastor, to shepherd his people, to fulfill his calling to be Cephas, to fulfill his calling to be the rock upon which the church was to be founded, and to retake his position as leader of the disciples. And that's a story which gives me considerable confidence when I am feeling low, when I am feeling inept, or out of my depth, or when I've screwed up badly. You see, Peter, the coward, the failure, the tempestuous potential drunk liable to let his mouth run away with him, the one who gave up too early, the one who abandoned his friend in his hour of need, he was not only forgiven, but able to move on from that position in the gutter to found the entire Christian church. He had things to learn, sure, but he could, and he did. So what's the take-home message? Well, that God can take the most fractured of us and turn us into rocks, if only we let him. Or, perhaps more earthily, if God can turn manure into mushrooms, just think what he might be able to do with you.